Hello friends, in this video we are going to cover the topic of Russian formalism as well as we will see the trend of the early 20th century. Basically, there are four orientations of criticism: mimetic, didactic, expressive, and objective one. Mimetic criticism means that the art should imitate the universe, it should reflect what society is doing, while the didactic criticism it is more oriented towards the readers. It means that the art is meant to teach morals to the readers. The third one is expressive. It belongs to the romantic age, which says that the poetry is spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions. So it means that the it is oriented towards the writer and the author. The fourth one is objective, and the fourth orientation is more towards the text. And this approach is being utilized or used in the modern age, and it is being used till now. So there are four orientations of criticism. The mimetic belongs to the Greek era. The didactic criticism, it belongs to the Elizabethan age or Restoration age. The third one is expressive, it belongs to the Romantic age. The fourth one is objective, and that belongs to the modern age. And so in the early 20th century or in the end of the 19th century, the focus was more towards text, that the only source of meaning is the text itself, and the text was valued for its own sake. And it follows that intrinsic approach of the text means that we are not going to refer to any external source, either it be the author or it be the reader, or to the background of the age. And we should also know that why and how Russian formalism emerged. So when Russian formalism came, it came in 1914, and it was the time when the art was considered as something mysterious, full of symbolism and poetic parables. Means that they thought that the text is so full of figurative language and imageries and parables that it is a kind of mystery, and we have to put in a lot of effort in order to understand it. The second reason, which is the most important one, is that the Russian formalism came when Marxism was trending in Russia. The leaders like Trotsky and Lenin, these were the leaders, and they were inspired by Karl Marx philosophy. And in 1917, there was Bolshevik revolution in Russia. So the Marxism was the center of every literary work, and they thought that they analyzed the literary work by by incorporating the themes of class struggle and class conflict, and they depicted different classes like upper class and the lower class, haves and haves not. So this was so incorporated into every literary work that it was not possible to separate the text from this particular theme. So what Russian critics they did was they focused more on the text, and they said that we should focus more on the text, and we should separate every ideological concept from the text. So formalism sees every literary work as self-sufficient, means that complete in itself. They say that the literary work is closed in itself, and it does not need any external reference. By self-sufficient means that it does not need anything. It is self-sufficient in meaning. It is self-sufficient in form, and constituted by internal relations. Relations means the how the words relate to each other, and what is the syntax and the morphology of the text. And it is independent of reference either to the state of mind of the author or to the external mind, meaning by that it does not need the author as the source of meaning, or the external world means the age it belongs to. So the work is complete in itself, and it does not need the source of meaning, either in the form of ideological concept of that age, or the social background, or the context. uh, it does not need anything in the by external evidence. The second thing is that the subject of literary scholarship is not literature in its totality, but literariness, that which makes of a given work an art of literature. It means that the Russian formalists, what they did was they were trying to distinguish a literary text from the non literary text. They were trying to distinguish that what makes any text literary and how it is separate or how it is different from a non literary text. And they got three basic points. The first point is that, according to formalists, a source of literariness is neither the author nor the subject matter, theme, or reader. Means that the formalists said that the source of literariness is not the author, not the subject matter, theme, or reader. Meaning by that, if we take author as the source of literariness, then it means that anything said by the author would be literary. So, is it possible that the author also writes a literary piece and he also writes laundry list? So, both cannot be literary. So, author is not the source of literariness, or the subject matter can also not be literary. For example, if we have a medical thesis or if we have a poem and they both cover the same subject matter, it's not possible that they both are literary. So, what makes a text literary? Not the author and not the subject matter or reader. Also, readers, they come from different social background with different knowledge and different literary tastes, so we cannot say that they are going to give meaning to the text, or their experiences and of reading the text can give text any particular meaning. So we cannot take reader as the source of literariness. These Russian formalists says that the source of literariness of a particular piece of work is its language, meaning by that the literariness lies in the language. The third point is that the literary language is different from non-literary language because literacy language is structured differently. So they said that there is a difference in literary language and non-literary language, in the form of that the literary language is different in structure. The literary language is full of figurative language and linguistic devices, the use of metaphors, and the morphology and the syntax of the literary language is so oriented that makes it literary. So they said that the author is not the source of literariness, the subject matter is not the source of literariness, the reader is not the source of literariness. Literariness comes by language and the way it is structured. They gave two general principles of this particular theory, and they said that first, literature itself, or rather those of its features that distinguish it from other human activities, must constitute the object of inquiry of literary theory. So the focus of the formalist study is literature apart from or distinguished from other human activities, meaning by the focus of the formalist is not medical, it's not this social field, rather it is the literature itself. Means that the focus of the formalists is literature apart from other human activities, and it's a broad term. The second is literary facts have to be prioritized over the metaphysical commitments of literary criticism. That they are not going to, the Russian formalists, they are not going to see the metaphysical commitments, whether it be the philosophical one beyond physical, whether it be the social one or psychological one or moral one, or it constitute themes like the theme of love or race or the theme of laws, all these themes are not concerned with the Russian formalism. They are not going to see the metaphysical aspects, rather, they are going to see the literary facts, like the literary language, the use of metaphors, symbols, and the use of other linguistic devices and figurative devices. So, the focus of the Russian formalist is first the literature, apart from other human activities, and second, the literary facts that are given importance over the metaphysical commitments of the text. In Russian formalism, we have two schools of thought. The one is Moscow Linguistic Circle, and the other one is Opoyas. Opoyas is also known as the Society for the Study of Poetic Language. In the Moscow Linguistic Circle, we have the leading figure as Roman Jakobson, while in Opoyas school of and society, in that society we have Viktor Shklovsky and Yuri Tyunyanov and Boris Eichenbaum. Baum. Coming to Viktor Shklovsky, we can say that Viktor Shklovsky is the leading figure of Russian formalism, and he gave the ideas of defamiliarization and automation, and he distinguished between story and plot, and also between poetic language versus practical language. So he is famous for his essay Art as Technique. It is also known as Art as Device, and he wrote this essay in 1919. He gave the idea of automation, and this automation, I'll first read from the slide which says, and then I'll explain it. It says, if we start to examine the general laws of perception, we see that as perception becomes habitual, it becomes automatic. Thus, for example, all of our habits retreat into the area of unconsciously automatic. If one remembers the sensation of holding a pen or of speaking in a foreign language and start comparing it with the feeling when performing the action at the 10,000th time, he will agree with us. He says that when we are doing certain things daily, then we stop perceiving them. Our perception fades about those particular things, and it somehow fades. So he says that this process is automation. In automation, we are not conscious about those feelings, and our perception about those things, it somehow lessens. Shklovsky said that we are so familiar and so automized with our perceptions that we have stopped noticing them, and our perception has now faded. So he gives the concept of defamiliarization, and he said that art defamiliarizes us. He says, an art exists that one may recover the sensation of life. It exists to make one feel things, to make the stone stony. The purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. So he says that art increases our perception. We perceive certain things in a different way due to art. With art, one feel things. Like if there is some stone, one may feel that it's stony. So our perception about things, it increases and it improves with art. The technique of art is to make objects unfamiliar, to make forms difficult, to increase the difficulty and length of perception, because the process of perception is an aesthetic end in itself and must be prolonged. He says that one should feel the difficulty while understanding art, because when the difficulty is increased and the time is prolonged, then the art is actually perceived and it is being felt. So art defamiliarizes us and makes us unfamiliar to things, and we perceive them in a new way, in a fresh way. He says art is a way of experiencing the artfulness of object. The object is not important. Shklovsky says that if we encounter certain object because of art, that object has not great importance. Art gives it certain importance, and due to art we perceive that object in a particular way. The object is not important. Art make increases its importance. So the example of defamiliarization can be multiple, because there are multiple examples of defamiliarization in poetry as well as in prose. There are certain techniques that if there is mentioning of something, so the author may not use the real word of that technique, of that practice. Rather, he describes or details that particular thing in a different way. So these lines are given and are quoted from the novel of Hanif, and from his novel of Our Lady of Alice Bhatti. In that particular novel, the male gaze and the experience of the woman moving in patriarchal society is so beautifully described. It says she avoids eye contact. She looks slightly over people's head as if looking out for somebody who might come into view at any moment. She does not want anyone to think that she is alone and nobody is coming for her. She sidesteps even when she sees a boy half her age walking towards her. She walks around little puddles when she can easily leap over them. She thinks any act that involves stretching her legs might send the wrong signal. She never eats in public. Putting something in your mouth is surely an invitation for someone to shove something horrible down your throat. So the writer could have simply said that it's very difficult for a woman to actively take part in the in society. So the writer could have easily said that it's difficult for women to actively participate in every sphere of life. But the Muhammad Hanif, he has so beautifully portrayed the experience of women, and not the given he has given examples like one the woman, the Alice Bhatti, she cannot eat in public and she sidesteps. The way he has described it's a kind of defamiliarization, and one after reading would feel that he would actually imagine those things. Like the women, they might experience this thing in their day-to-day life, and they are so automized with that feeling that they stop noticing it. But with defamiliarization in the art, one can experience those feelings, one can imagine that thing actually happening, and that perception is actually increased. So, Shklovsky, in his essay, he distinguishes between the poetic language as well as the practical language. He says that practical language is for communication purpose, while the poetic language, it is a form language and it is a roughened language, because in the poetic language the structure of syntax, linguistic structures, they are deviated from their normal use, due to which the poetic language is different. And when there are use of figurative devices, with the use of imageries and with the use of metaphors, it is roughened language, it's a form language. And when it is a form language, then the difficulty and the length of understanding it is increased, and the one might have to spend more time in deciphering the poetic language, due to which the artistic effect is increased and one feels defamiliarized with the poetic language and may experience and perceive those things in greater degree. So he distinguished that poetic language is a defamiliarized language as comparison to the practical language. Shklovsky in his essays distinguished and the compared the concept of story versus plot. He said that the story is somehow the content. It is the raw material. It is something that is related with the theme, while the plot, it's the compositional device of the content. It says that the plot is how the story is structured. So you people might have read God of Small Things, and God of Small Things is the story of two twins, Rahel and Esther. When the novel starts, then the Sophie Mole is already dead, and then after a few chapters we come to know that Sophie Mole is coming to the Eminem and then it shifts to the future. So there's continuously shifting from past to present and present to past, and that's how the plot is structured. So Shklovsky said the story is the you can say the thematic concept, while the plot, it's the narrative device. Then in the Opoyas group and the Opoyas school of thought, we have Boris Eichenbaum, and he wrote an essay named as Theory of Formal Method, and in that essay he further talked about how the poetic language is different from the poetic language, and how the poetic and practical language are different. And he said that the in poetic language, the linguistic items have the independent value of their own, while the practical language is different because the words and the linguistic items have no independent value. He says that if there is a particular line, and in the practical language we will say like the wind is blowing fast, while in poetic language we are going to say that uh, O wild west wind, thou speak of autumn being. So, in the poetic language, we have the use of alliteration and the continuous emphasis on the four syllables in poetic language, while the practical language is they have no independent value of its own. So, the practical and poetic language are different. He also said that the form uh, he gave the general idea of form, and he said that the form is not a vessel into which the content is poured. He said that it's not any envelope, it's not a vessel into which a content is poured, rather form it itself the content. He said that form is the self-contained and self-sufficient verbal identity, and it is itself content. So he said and gave importance to form. The third point is that he said that the rhythm in poetry is not a superficial appendage, rather, it forms and gives the structural basis to poetry. He also said that as the Shklovsky has already distinguished between the story and the plot, so he said that the structure of plot is created in terms of its motivation. That why the story has to be structured in a particular way, it is because of the motivation of doing it. That the meaning must match with the structural basis of the plot. Then we have Roman Jacobson. He is a linguist as well as a theoretician. Jacobson says that the poetic function is achieved by the text when the text captures attention because of its poeticity, and the poeticity is achieved when there are linguistic and figurative devices in the text. And that's how the poetic function, when it has a certain impact on the reader, it leaves an impact on the attitude of the reader. And then there are concepts of metaphor and metonymy in the in his essay that was given in 1956, and he talks about the two aspects of language and two types of aphasic disturbances. Basically, he said that there are two poles of language. The one is syntagmatic and the other one is paradigmatic. In the syntagmatic one is the one which is the horizontal axis, and paradigmatic one is the one which is the vertical axis. In the syntagmatic axis, the words are associated with each other on the basis of their relation, while in paradigmatic relation, the words are substituted against each other, and it's on the vertical axis. And he compared these two axes with the metaphor and metonymy. The paradigmatic axis is constituted by the metaphor, where the words are substituted because of similarity, while the syntagmatic axis is replaced with the metonymy, where the words are associated with each other. Metaphor is the one is the linguistic device when the words are replaced on the basis of the similarity. while metonymy is the one when the part is um, used to show the wholeness of something. The part is rather written. So these two are the two poles of axis, and he said that the metaphor and the metonymy, they constitute the bipolar. He said that the language has a bipolar structure that oscillate between the poles of metaphor and metonymy. It means that when these two devices are given importance and these are used, and the two poles of the language are formed, and that the development of any discourse takes place along these two semantic lines, then in this way he gave importance to the two figurative devices that are there. And he said that the metaphor, it actually comprises the vertical axis, and metonymy comprises the horizontal axis. So these were the key figures in the Russian formalism theory, and they including Viktor Shklovsky, Boris Eichenbaum, and Roman Jakobson, and they talked about automation and defamiliarization, and they gave the concepts that how poetic language is different from the practical language, and they talked and differentiated between the story versus plot, and Roman Jacobson gave prior importance to the devices of metaphor and metonymy. And in 1930 specifically, this theory somehow collapsed when Stalin, he was against this Russian formalism, and they disbanded it because the Russian formalists, they were so focused on the text, and they were totally narrow in their approach, because they were not undertaking, and they were not giving importance to the ideological concepts of that time. And mainly the complaint of the Marxists was that they were not talking about the Communist Party, and they were not talking that how goodness is achieved when their party has come in reign. So they disbanded this Russian formalist group in 1930. It collapsed.